Yeah, so the recording has gone on to the cloud straight away, right?
Okay.
So then I can give permission, and Olga runs our YouTube, and she work takes care of all the speakers related items for our SQL Saturdays. So
So this is going to get posted to YouTube at some point after we're done?
that is the question I have to ask you. Is it okay for us to post it on YouTube?
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Um, excuse me. And that's actually really great because after I gave this presentation in Albany back in May, uh, Ray Kim asked me if it was recorded anywhere online because he wanted to link to it from his blog, and it wasn't. So now that this is being recorded tonight, and if we can post it on YouTube, then I can say, "Hey, Ray, here you go."
So I'm speaking at the Dallas user group tomorrow about 20 stupid things that we do as DBAs. Actually, there are quite a few more, but one of them is how we never document ourselves or how poor we are at succession planning. So either way, right? It cuts both ways, of course, right? So please go ahead, sir.
Well, all right. Well, I hope this is useful for you there. So thank you very much for having me again. I was down there in person in Houston last summer. Did not have an opportunity to travel there this summer. Excuse me. But I'm glad we could make this work. Tonight we're talking about documenting your work for a worry-free vacation. My name, if you haven't met me before, is Andy Levy. I'm a senior data platform engineer at SS&C. It's been about a year and a quarter since I started there. Contact info is right up there. Don't worry about grabbing it right now. It'll be on the last slide as well. A little bit of background. I've been doing IT since the last millennium, which makes me feel really, really old when I say that, but it's true. Just barely true. And I've worn a whole bunch of hats in that time. Last almost 10 years now, I've been a production DBA. Wow, it's been almost 10 years already. And I've spent about half of that time as a lone DBA. I was the only DBA in the building. And that presented me with a lot of challenges. Most notably, even when I was on vacation, I couldn't turn off my phone. I couldn't switch off because yes, there are people still in the office. Yes, they can get access to do some of the things that I would do, but I have trust issues. And I, yeah, I want to make sure that if they're going to cover for me, they're going to do the right thing. And if we have a problem, let's not make it worse. So we're going to talk about when we're on vacation, how can we have a more peaceful time? Or just on the weekends, or just in the evenings, depending on how busy your systems are. So, what do I do when I'm not at work? Which hopefully is a lot of the time because I should only be working 40 hours a week, 5 days a week. The rest of the time, I split my year in half. The first half, I'm camping with my family as much as I can. We bought an RV several years ago. Get out camping as much as we can. A lot of gorgeous places in New York State to go camping. Uh, this picture is taken on the shore of Lake Ontario in the far northeast corner, not far from Canada. And this was August. Gorgeous sunset. We were huddled around that campfire in hoodies and jeans because despite the fact that it was August, it was really cold with that wind whipping off the lake. The other half of the year, I got to update this picture. I am a mentor for the Tanks 3003 First Robotics Competition team operated out of our local high school. Every year we get a new challenge, a new game to play. We have to design, test, build, break, rebuild, and program a 150-pound robot to play a different game, answer a different challenge that we get excuse me, in January. We find out in January, we compete in March and April, and if we're good enough, we get to go on to the World Championships, which is being held in Houston until at least 2034. We got that opportunity 4 years ago, and we're hoping to get there again soon. hopefully before my youngest graduates from high school. This is a family thing, just like the camping. I got my son got involved in middle school. Then I got involved when he got up to high school. My daughter got interested in middle school, and my wife got into it because she was never going to see her family if she didn't get involved because we spend all our time in robotics. So I take my time away from work really seriously and try to make the most of it. Unfortunately, as a lone DBA, work was intruding. July of 2022, we were out camping in just outside of Columbus, Ohio. Beautiful, very large KOA campground there. Had a wonderful time. But towards the end of our stay there, phone rang while I was outside making breakfast. It's work. And a notification, this job failed. What do I do? Spend the next 15 minutes or so walking the network services manager through the process of connecting to my jump box, then connecting the management studio, finding the server, finding the job that had failed, and running and manually kicking it off again to make it run. It wasn't a huge deal. Money wasn't lost. It wasn't a massive problem, but it interrupted my breakfast while I was out camping. So a little stressful, but it everything was okay. It worked out. The following summer, August 2023, we were on a cruise up to Alaska. Myself, my immediate family, my in-laws, and it's great. I love going on cruises because it's really easy to get disconnected from the outside world. I don't get the internet package. Nobody can reach me unless they have an iPhone, because you can still use iMessage from iPhone to iPhone when you're on a cruise ship because of how notifications work with the onboard app. Anyway, that's not super important, but the next to last day of the trip, we're cruising down the coast of British Columbia towards Victoria. I get a text from my boss. He says, "Andy, we got a problem. The TLS encryption certificate for the production SQL Server cluster is going to expire tonight. What's going to happen when it does, and how do we prevent it?" I said to him, "Jeff," because his name was Jeff, "Jeff, if that expires, nothing's going to be able to connect to the SQL Server. It's going to stop the business. This is a big problem." I spent the next 2 or so hours going back and forth with him, tapping out on my phone from memory, because I didn't have an internet connection, how to install and configure a new TLS certificate on SQL Server. And while I'm doing that, he's sending me other things. Oh, this person, they found this thing on Microsoft's website. It says we have to get into the registry and do this and that. And I said, no, do not touch the registry. If you touch the registry, you might break the whole thing. Do what I'm telling you to do, please. So he says, okay, we'll do it. We'll let you know. We got into Victoria, British Columbia that evening, about 15 minutes before they were scheduled to make the change. Opened up Teams on my phone, opened up my email, saw that things were in motion, and they got through it. They were able to get everything restarted and configured. Uh-oh, that was my clicker. And everything was working just fine. So we dodged the bullet. But I said to Jeff afterwards, look, this could have gone very, very badly, and I left you in a really bad position. Monday, when I get back to the office, the very first thing I need to do is document how to make this change, how to do this. He said, no, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. We got through it. It's fine. I said, no, Jeff, I failed you. I left you in a very bad position where you could have had the business stop because I didn't document how to keep things running. So I need to make this documentation happen. And I didn't get it done on Monday. I got it done on Tuesday after I got back. There's so much email I had to get through. But the point is, I got back to the office. I got it documented so that now I don't have to get my vacation interrupted by this sort of a situation. Now, I swear this is not just a flimsy excuse for me to show you all the cool places I've gone on vacation the past few years. The next spring, April 2024, actually it was in February, a buddy of mine texted me, he said, hey, I'm going to Philadelphia. I'm going to check out this dry dock tour they're doing at the USS New Jersey. It's in dry dock. They're refurbishing it because they have to do it every so often as a museum ship. Do you want to meet me there? I thought about it for a little bit. My wife said, "Oh, just go do it." So I did it. Drove down to Philadelphia, got into town in the evening, early evening, picked him up at the airport, had dinner. Wake up Saturday morning ahead of our tour of the dry dock. I've got 250 emails in my inbox at 6 a.m. on a Saturday. That is never good for anyone. And at this point, I'm still the only DBA who's managing these servers. So I pull out the work laptop, I connect, and for some reason we had failovers. Why did we have failovers in the middle of the night? Why did we have both nodes of a failover cluster instance being rebooted at the same time? That negates the whole point of having a failover cluster. What's going on here? Connected to SQL Server and found that my databases somehow had time traveled backwards 6 weeks. All the data that we had produced in the previous 6 weeks was gone. What happened? Where did it go? Tried to contact a whole bunch of people. It's 6:45 on a Saturday morning. Nobody's answering their phones. Had to make an executive decision. I shut it down because I didn't want to make the problem worse. Especially, I didn't want to have people putting data in knowing that our system was backdated. So after I got that done, people started calling me back. I said, okay, here's our situation, and started figuring out, well, what do we need to do? Had breakfast, went over to the shipyard, and spent 5 hours in my car in the parking lot at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard rebuilding our production SQL Server instance from backups. I did go ahead and do the tour several hours later than we planned on, but it ruined the whole day in terms of we had other plans to do things. It ruined that. But again, I was the only DBA. I had not adequately documented how do we recover everything from production backups. We could have invoked our DR process, but then it would have affected many, many more systems, and we didn't want to go to that extreme. So, lesson learned, I didn't have proper documentation even to rebuild things from backups. Last one, later that summer, I was camping up near Canada on the St. Lawrence River with my family again. And Sunday night, alert goes off, job failed. Well, what do we have to do? At this point, I had a team around me. We had been acquired. I joined a team with a half dozen other DBAs. They were still getting up to speed on all these systems that I'd been managing for 5 years. So they weren't fully on call for those, like, I guess we can call them legacy systems. I took a look at it and said, oh, well, if this job was going to fail, this was the least bad way for it to fail on the least bad day for it to fail. So uh, it was it ended up being a very minor issue. Just reset some things so that it would run properly the following night. But again, my morning when I was supposed to be enjoying a peaceful campground morning, it was kind of intruded upon by work because I didn't have things documented where other people could pick it up and take care of it. So what documentation do we really need to properly support our systems and help other people support our systems? Well, support documentation. What do we do when something breaks? What do we need to know about the environment to know how to respond when something breaks? How-to documents. How do I execute this process? Somebody asked me to do ABC. How do we do this? What's our standard way of doing that task? Environment configuration. What servers do we have? How do we access them? When do backups run? Where do the backups live? All that sort of stuff. Different people are going to have different needs for this information. So what we need to do is we need to find a repository that we can put documentation into. first and foremost. We can't write something if we don't have a good place to put it. So what are the criteria for our repository that we're going to create? Number one, it has to be readily accessible. If it's on some file share that's hidden, buried 7 layers deep in under the X drive that gets connected only when you're on the VPN, that's not readily accessible. People can't get to that quickly. They're not going to be able to find that. Everyone needs to know where it is. Where do I find it? Hopefully, other teams also have documentation. Can we put our DBA documentation alongside it? Can we put it in a similar place? Or can we at least put it someplace where everyone knows, oh yeah, the DBAs, they keep all their stuff over there. It needs to be searchable, because when you get to have the point of having a lot of documentation, that's great, but how do you find the thing that you need? And Control F doesn't always work. The search in Windows Explorer, I've never had much luck with that. So it needs to be in a format that can be easily searched so that we can find the things that we are needing in an emergency situation. We need to be transformable. Different audiences are going to have different needs. If I have an MSP who's my break glass in case of emergency support, which we had that for a couple of years while I was the Lone DBA, they may not have access to the repository itself. Can I turn my documents into a collection of PDFs and provide that to them? Can I create a series of web pages of that for that documentation so people can follow through the links? Or can I turn it into a format that I can then send into our AI agents, our LLMs? Can I feed this into Claude and have it start building a knowledge base, or maybe point an MCP server at it so that I can go and ask my corporate AI assistant for information right then and there? And it needs to be tracked. We need to know who changed this document, what did they change, and when did they change it? And just in general, how old is this document? If I've got a document about how backups are performed and where they live, but it hasn't been touched in 7 years, there's a good chance that backup locations have moved. Maybe we went from local disk to a network share, or from network share to cloud storage, or some other method of doing backups. Excuse me. Uh, we need to know, and maybe the server names have changed. Maybe we still back up to a network share, but maybe it's a different network share. We need to make sure that these are being kept up to date and that they're trustworthy by checking the age of the documentation. So we had a lot of criteria for what this repository is going to do, what it's going to do for our documents. Where is this thing going to live? File share, I kind of mentioned that already. We could put it out on file share. It sucks for search. It's not going to be easy to find things. Everybody needs to be able to have access to that file share. So file shares, yeah, they were great 20, 25 years ago. Not so much anymore. We could put stuff into SharePoint. Everyone loves SharePoint, right? Yeah, nobody likes using SharePoint, at least in my experience. SharePoint doesn't really play nice with a lot of the file formats that aren't Microsoft Office formats. Search is sketchy sometimes, and you still have to make sure that everyone has access to the site, the SharePoint site that your documents are living in. And you may not have permission as the DBA team, you may not have the ability to grant access to your SharePoint site, or you may not even be allowed to have a SharePoint site. You could put it in Microsoft Teams, which, by the way, the file sharing behind MS Teams is still just SharePoint. And the team that I was merged into at my previous job, they did use Teams for a lot of their documentation. They had Word documents and Excel documents in Teams, but does everybody who might need access to those documents, do they have access to your section of Microsoft Teams, to your team in Teams. And then once you're into the team itself, each chat, each chat underneath that team has its own set of file shares. Where do you put the documents there? How do you find the documents once they're in there? And how do you protect yourself from duplicating things? Oh, I'm going to copy it from here to here. Now you have two documents. Which one is the authoritative source? So, not a great place to put it. And also, like I said before, with SharePoint, Teams struggles with non-Office formats. Tickets in Jira or Azure DevOps. This is how we did it at a couple of jobs ago. We would be asked for routine things. We need you to do ABC to database 123. And our process for that was, we've done that before. We're going to go back into Azure DevOps tickets, find the most recent one. Hopefully it's the right one. Pull the script out of there, change the parameters, run it, and then take that script and attach it to my new ticket. Well, the trouble with doing that is you find a ticket. If it's not the most recent one, what if that script changed? What if that script changed and now the process that you did a year ago in the ticket that you found is not the right process, it's not the right script? Now you're going to have a problem on your hands. So just digging back to your old tickets, not really ideal. Or you can create a wiki. People still love wikis, I hope. A lot of people are using Confluence as it came along with their Atlassian Jira subscription, or they're using a wiki in Azure DevOps because that's got some wiki functionality built right into it. It's on the web. It's fairly easy to access. If you're not self-hosting, you can access it when you're not even on the VPN, which is really nice, especially if the VPN goes down. So there's a lot to be said for using a wiki. It's in your web browser. So maybe we can go that route. So formatting, what format should the documents take? And I'm not talking about a style guide. I'm talking about what file format are we using? A lot of people in the past, myself included, have used Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word gets very helpful with formatting. Smart quotes. Everyone loves when smart quotes come in, right? Now you can't copy and paste code out of your document because Microsoft helped you with that. And then when you put images in, it resizes and it messes up all your formatting. Ugh, it's not great. RTF, rich text format, that's been around a very long time. Not a lot of people use it. WordPad still exists. You can still edit there. But nobody really uses it. HTML, who likes writing HTML? Yikes. I've stopped writing HTML. See, it's 2026. I stopped writing HTML 20 plus years ago. Your proprietary wikis, like Confluence, they store it however they store it behind the scenes. You can extract your content, but you might need plugins to get at it. Or you can just go with plain text. Plain text works everywhere. You can use Notepad++, Visual Studio Code, Management Studio, anything that can write text, you can use with plain text. I like a little addition to that, Markdown. Markdown is plain text, but with added characters, added syntax to indicate formatting. But the thing is, if you don't render it to be a rich text, with bold and italics and things like that, it's still readable as plain text. So you get the best of both worlds. And what's really cool is because a lot of systems now work natively with Markdown and have for a number of years, you can transform it very easily in an automated way. You can convert to PDF, to Word, to HTML. You can probably convert to PowerPoint if you really want to. And LLMs, AI agents, they love reading Markdown. If you've gotten into using that stuff, like all your skills and your instructions and everything else, those are all written in Markdown already. They understand Markdown. They can just eat that stuff up. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our documentation into an Azure DevOps wiki that's generated from Markdown. So let's see what that looks like. I'm in Azure DevOps. I've got a project called Data Stuff under my FLX SQL, and it's just completely empty to start here. And you see I've got a wiki right there under the overview, but there's nothing in it. I'm going to go to the repository. The repository even is empty. I haven't put anything in there yet. Haven't even really been created. So I'm going to go ahead and clone that down to my computer. I'm going to do it with the command prompt because actually I'm doing the PowerShell prompt because I love PowerShell. So I'm just going to copy that URL there, take it over to PowerShell, git clone, and it's going to clone it down to my desktop. And I appear to have cloned an empty repository. Great, that's what we're going to fix. I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code to that location. And again, I've got an empty repository. I'm going to right click in there in the Explorer view and create two new folders, code and docs. In this case, I'm putting my code and my documentation in the same repository. I don't have to do that. If I've got security concerns or just snooping, prying eyes concerns, I can create multiple repositories in my project and have one for code, one for documentation. I'm just not doing that here. Within documentation, within docs, I'm going to create a new file and call it creatingdocumentation.md. Sorry, there's a strange noise out there. MD is the canonical file extension for Markdown documents. I'm going to go ahead and start writing it up. This is what raw Markdown looks like, if you haven't seen it before. It's still very readable, but it's got some formatting hints in here, and Visual Studio Code is going to highlight them to make it a little easier to see. So my headings work just like HTML headings, heading 1 and word headings. Heading 1, excuse me, heading 2, heading 3, just with the number of pound signs. My bulleted list, it's just asterisks or hyphens. Those are my bullets. So it looks kind of like a bulleted list, but it's still very readable as plain text. The one thing that's proprietary to the Azure DevOps stuff, and it probably works with GitHub as well. By the way, what I'm showing in Azure DevOps, you can also do this in GitHub. It's a little bit different how you get it working, but the same concepts roughly apply. The one thing that's proprietary that's not really Markdown is the two brackets with TOC between them. That's actually a flag to Azure DevOps. When it renders this document, it's going to automatically create a table of contents for me using the headings that are in my document. So this is my very basic Markdown document. You see in the upper right corner there, you get those two panes with the magnifying glass on. I just highlighted in the red box. It's a preview pane. If I click on that, I get a preview pane to the right of my rendered Markdown. This may not be exactly how it gets rendered on the web, but it's close enough to at least see that you've got your formatting roughly where you want to be. You don't have any things that you forgot to close, like you have italics running on for 3 sentences because you missed an underscore or something like that. So we got the basics of our document. I'm going to go to the source control panel in Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to put a note in here. What did I change? Except when I'm committing to my Git repository, I don't want to document what it is that I changed because Git already keeps track of that. I want to keep track of why I changed it, and that's really the most important part. Git's going to keep track of the when, the who, and the what. Your comment is going to focus on the why. So this is the beginning of my new document on documentation, which is kind of the what as well, but I didn't really have much else I could say there. Go down to changes and I click that little plus icon next to next to my file to stage the changes. And then I'm going to go ahead and commit it. Now, if you haven't worked with Git previously, the way Git works is you have a local copy of your repository and you make changes there and commit them, and all of your changes kind of stay local. When you're ready to share them with other people, that's when you push them up to the central server. So in this case, I went ahead and hit the little down arrow and said commit and push because I just wanted to get it out there right away. But I didn't have to do that. I could just click commit and that would give me basically a checkpoint locally, and then I can keep working. So you can do this all offline, and then when you get back online, you can push all your changes up at once. We pop back over to Azure DevOps, and there's my repository, and there's my document I just created, and there's my commit. Awesome. If I click on the document, I can see the content that I just created. Okay, great. Kept track of what I gave it to keep track of. I hope so.
So I have a
Now I need to,
question.
yes.
So before you start documenting, right, do you actually go ahead and have some sort of planning or a organizational tree structure of where documents would go, not just your document? As an
So,
initial planning, for example, you are in the data team, for example, your would go here, the DevOps guys would go in the second branch, and so on and so forth. I'm just thinking, or would you also consider on top of filing instructions, the naming instructions? How do you name the documents? Just just a thought.
yeah, so that's a great question. As far as having a strategy and especially for naming, uh, part of it comes down to how wide reaching is the repository that you're working in. If you are so where I'm at right now, everybody's working in Confluence for a few more days, and that's been interesting. Um, but everyone's working in Confluence, and everyone gets a folder under the wiki for their team. So the DBA team has one, the infrastructure team has one, and then within our folders, we pretty much organize it as we see fit. So we have one folder for SQL Server, one for Postgres, one for MongoDB, and then if we and then in other areas we might separate it out by business unit. So it, it it really depends on how granular you need to get and how many people are going to be working within that one repository. Uh, at my previous job, I had created at least 70 pieces of documentation between Confluence and Azure DevOps. Um, yeah, Confluence and Azure DevOps, but it was only DBA stuff. So I didn't have much of a folder structure there because um, I didn't really need it. I had how-tos and I had general support, and I think I had one one other folder, and really as much relied upon search as anything else to help find things. The great thing is though, because it's all managed in Git, you can move things around and the history is retained. So if you try one organizational strategy and it's just not working out for you, you can change things up a little bit, um, and not be too disrupted. I don't know if that answered the question enough or not. Unfortunately, it it may come down to a team decision how
Yeah,
much.
that's pretty
Yeah,
much. So you do, so what we have done in the past is we would have a team meeting and then decide how we are going to document. Because then otherwise you would also be in the same situation is that, damn it, I have the documentation, but I don't know where it is or what it looks like. So
right.
I think a little bit of planning upfront might also help you take a better vacation if I can say so.
Yes, a little bit of planning definitely does help. It's important to not get too bogged down in analysis paralysis. And my feeling is, especially coming out of being a lone DBA for 5 years, I would rather have the documentation and have it be searchable just so that I don't get calls over spending a ton of time trying to get the perfect organizational structure down and delay creating my documentation. I can always reorganize it later. But to me, when I was working as the only DBA, it was much more important to me that I just get all this knowledge out of my head and shared with other people in some form, just so that it was usable, first and foremost.
So we also had something called as an iManage, which a lot of law firms use to file their documentation, cases, and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
those, every single document is stored in SQL Server. And everything is searchable by text. Okay, I want a document that sounded like this with a soundex thing, right? And
Yeah.
then, of course, if you have document number, great.
Yeah. So that I mean, once we have our documentation searchable or accessible to, our AI agents and, other search engines, we've got a lot of that. We're just kind of coming along for the ride at that point with some of that documentation and some of that help. So we don't have to get into storing them in our own databases. So so we got our document. It's in the repository now. We need to now take that repository and turn it into our project wiki. So I'm back in Azure DevOps, and over on the far right, bottom right corner there, you see a little button that says Publish Code as Wiki right next to Create a Project Wiki. I could click Create Project Wiki, and it would go ahead and let me set something up very much like Confluence, but I'm going to publish the code as a wiki. So I click on that. That brings up a panel. It says which repository do you want to use, which folder in that repository, and even which branch. I'm going to pick the docs folder in my data stuff repository, give it a name, and then I click publish. Now I have a wiki. That was it. That was the entire process of creating the wiki. And every time I commit to that repository in the main branch, it's going to update the wiki automatically. I don't have to do anything extra to do for that. And even better, because it's a Git repository, if I have a local copy on my desktop and I need to reference those documents, I don't have to be online. I can be offline and I can access it because I've got a copy on my system. So you can see right here, we've got under creating documentation, we have the table of contents. I didn't write that table of contents. Azure DevOps rendered it for me automatically because I put that tag in the document. If I click the hamburger menu up in the upper right corner, view revisions, I can see the Git history for that item. It says, Andy did this. Here was the message that he put in, when he did it. And if I click on any one of those versions, I can see the change history. Just like you can see in Wikipedia, just like you can see for your regular source code in GitHub, it works exactly the same way. So when we're writing our documentation, now we know where we're putting it. We have to consider our audience. Who is going to be consuming this documentation? By the way, all these images that you see here, these cartoony diagram pictures, these are all generated by AI. They're going to get really funny later on because AI wasn't very smart about how it did some things. So my audience, my immediate teammates. Well, for 5 years, I didn't have a team. It was just me. But once we had that acquisition, we started getting integrated. Now I have a half dozen teammates who I need to help learn these systems that they're going to be responsible for helping to support. Other IT department members, the network services manager who called me when I was camping in Ohio. He had access, or he could be given the access to do what needed to be done, but he's not super familiar with SQL Server. It's been a long time since he touched it. So I need to make sure that if he's going to have to follow this document, I make it easy for him to follow. Service providers. I mentioned the MSP that we had is the break glass in case of emergency. These folks, they know PowerShell and SQL Server and all the other things far better than I ever will, I'm sure. So they don't need to be guided on how to connect to Management Studio, but they do need to know what servers are in play. They, they do need to know who to contact about system X, system Y that depends on database A. And what it comes down to as well is how fluent is your audience in the technologies, in the tools, in the tasks that you're asking them to take on. I have worked on teams. I love PowerShell. I spend all day in PowerShell. There are things that I shouldn't admit to this, but I don't know how to do them in Management Studio because I do them always in PowerShell. Um, I probably shouldn't admit to that, but that's that. There we are. But I have had teammates who barely know how to use PowerShell. So I need to be able to tailor my documentation to a wide audience and make sure that it's understandable and doesn't make assumptions. The goal being we want the users of our documentation to fall into the pit of success. Follow the document and you will succeed. Make it that simple. So, for example, when you have system generated alerts, they send out an email. You've got a SQL Server agent job that sends out a failure alert email. Hey, this job failed. Don't just send out the email that says, hey, the job failed. In the job, in the email that you send out, put a link to the document that explains what the job is, how to investigate it, and how to fix it. Include screenshots where they're appropriate. Don't be dependent upon them. They should enhance how people use your document. So you want to have a text narrative and then back that up with screenshots. If you have a visually impaired coworker and their screen reader doesn't do well with screenshots, screenshots aren't going to help them. They need the text that can be read for them. Provide examples of how you fixed a particular problem in the past. Or even better, give people code to do it. For example, I had a previous job. I had a SQL Server agent job, ran SSIS package every 15 minutes. And it was a pretty basic ETL. But there was a possibility because of how people had put data into the source system, every now and then we would get it to a condition where it would fail, the ETL would fail. And unfortunately, once the ETL started to fail, it would not succeed again until there was manual cleanup done on the destination site, the destination database, or maybe it was in the staging database, I forget now. So I provide an example. Okay, this job failed. Here is how I resolved it. I went into the SSIS job history. I found where it failed. The error had the record number. I take that record number, I put it into these queries. I verify that that is what I want to be cleaning up, and then I delete these couple of records and everything will be fine. So that was my example. Then I said to myself, well, wait a minute. I can write some code to do most of that for me. So I turned it around and I said, well, the SSIS job history, that's in a table. I can query that table. I can look for the number. I can extract it from that text, and then I can create the queries from that and everything. Great. So now I have code. I can just give somebody copy and paste that code. Now they've got an easier way to fix it. And then I realized, well, gee, I have code. I can package that as a stored procedure. Ultimately, what my document ended up being was when this happens, you're going to run this stored procedure with these parameters to verify what it's going to do, and then change the dry run flag from yes to no, and then run it again, and it will fix it. And I kept the example, I kept all the other code in the document just so people could see what we were doing, but I managed just through the course of writing the document, found a better way to handle it. How-to documents. We have a process we run manually every 6 weeks to a month. We have to refresh some databases. I started writing a how-to for that because I was missing steps of the process that I created myself. So I stopped trusting myself and I created a how-to for myself. And then I got a team around me. Now other people are going to be able to run this. Well, let's make sure that document works. So here's how I write my how-to documents. We're writing a how-to on how to write a how-to. It needs to be step by step, every possible step of the way. Take nothing for granted and assume nothing when you're doing it. It may seem silly to have to say, yes, log on to the jump server first, and then, yes, launch a PowerShell window. But we have to assume nothing because we don't know the fluency of the person who's going to be running this how-to. And it's going to be an iterative process. This is not a one-time deal. It's going to be an iteration. So what I do is I take my first draft, I write it up, and then I get on the phone with a colleague who's never done this before. And I say, okay, colleague, you're going to watch me do this process, and I want you to follow along in the document as I'm doing it. Ask questions. Ask any question you can think of as we're going. If something seems weird, if I do something out of order, if I do something that you don't see in that document, ask me about it. We're going to write all those down, and when we're done with that session, I'm going to update the documentation. We might do this 2 or 3 times, depending on how complex everything is and how careful I was on my first draft. Second thing we're going to do, we're going to turn it around. My colleague is going to follow the guide and process the whole thing while I'm watching. And the hardest part of this is, for me, I don't say a word. I can't say a word. That's really, really hard for me to do. I like to talk. But my colleague's going to follow that guide while I'm watching. I want them to talk themselves through, think out loud, ask questions as they're going through. Okay, well, step 2 says to do this, step 3 says to do this, but I don't understand how I got from 2 to 3. Can there must be something missing in here. I'm going to write those down, update my document again. And then we're going to do that again and again and again. This feedback that you are getting from your colleague as you're going through this process is a gift. Treat it as such. Any feedback about your documentation is a gift. If people are coming back to you and saying, hey, this can be made better and here's why, that means that they're reading it. It means that they want to use it. This is all great feedback. Take it as the gift that it is. And you don't necessarily have to implement everything if you don't totally agree with it, but at least people are using it. They're reading your work. So you're going to go through that process. Your colleague's going to follow the guide while you're watching. At some point, they're going to execute the entire process and not ask you a single question, and it will go correctly. Once you've done that, congratulations, you've finished the process. So here's an example. This is lightly copied from something I did at my previous job for refreshing a database in our development environment from production. So we have an introduction, we have the prerequisites, we have the process. We got 6 prerequisites, we have 6 process steps. Okay, I'm not going to read through them all there, but prerequisites: access to a DBA jump server, the latest version of a function, the DBA tools module. Those are a couple of our prerequisites. And then the process: log on to the jump server, launch PowerShell, make a copy-only backup, delete the backup after you're done. There's 12 bullet points there. I have 9 questions coming out of these 12 bullet points. What jump server? How do I get DBA tools? How do I get this function? How do I launch PowerShell? What file share can I use? How do I load this function? How do I make the backup? How do I execute the function? And how do I delete the backup? 9 questions out of 12 bullet points. There's a lot of work we need to do here. So I've enhanced a little bit. This is version 2. Now, for the prerequisites, access to a DBA jump server. The jump server is a link. It's going to take me over to a document about the jump servers. Great. Now we have setup instructions. You only have to execute these once the first time you follow this process. Here's how you install DBA tools. Here's how you get the DBA stuff repository to get that function. Here's the process. Now we've got actual code we can copy and paste. And that little icon in the upper right corner, each of those code blocks, you click on that. And again, this is something Azure DevOps just rendered automatically. Click on that, it copies to your clipboard, you paste it into PowerShell window, you're done. You run it. So here's how you make sure you get the latest version. Here's how you load your function into your session. Here's how you make your backup. So we've got 8 steps in our process now, and we're starting to explain how we do these things. So this is a lot better, but bullet point 6 there, make note of the file name and path output when the backup is complete. Why do I have to do that? Why should I be asking the person who's following this process to do that? Where are they going to do it? Are they copying and pasting it into Notepad? Do they have a physical notepad right there on their desk? How are we doing this? Is there a better way we can do that? Turns out, in this case, there is. When we make the backup, we can save that information to a variable, and now the system is taking care of remembering it for me. I don't have to make note of anything. I don't have to write it down. So as I'm working through all this code to give people my user the how-to, I'm improving the process as well and streamlining it for everybody. But we want to add a little bit more to this document. So
Only 5 minutes.
What's that?
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Oh boy, I got to really rush then.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to get an image in here. So I can't just paste an image into a text file, right? With Visual Studio Code, if I take a screenshot and put that onto my clipboard, if I just go into my document, hit Control V or Edit Paste, it will take what's on my clipboard, create an image.png, and put the reference to it in the markdown right where my cursor was. So now I've got an image of my remote desktop connection window there. Now I'm going to rename it. One downer here is when you rename it in the Explorer view, it doesn't rename the reference in the document and vice versa. So you have to rename it in both places. But we do want to rename it because image.ping, image01, image02, image03, that doesn't work for anybody. And then our images are going to be right alongside the documents in the repository. Scheduled jobs. I like to keep an index of scheduled jobs in the documentation. Where do those jobs run? Which servers do they run on? When do they run? What dependencies do they have? External servers, external file shares, other factors that may be out of my control as the DBA. These are the dependencies that we have. And if they fail, how soon do they need attention? If a transaction log backup fails once, it's not great, but I don't have to jump into action right away. If it fails twice in a row, now we've got a problem. And then a link to the details about that job. So here's an example right here. These are all pretty standard jobs. I've got jobs, when they run, the response time required. That's, if it fails, when do we have to jump into action? And then full documentation is just a link to the documents about detailed documents about each of those jobs. And then the dependencies, we've got a file share there for some of them. When a job fails, I mentioned this earlier, when you send out the email notification that, hey, this job failed, here's the link. Click on that link, go check, here's your investigation, retry, and resolution. And that takes me right to the documentation in my wiki of this process. So I've got the background, where it runs, when it runs, high-level description of what it is in English, doesn't have to be super detailed. What's this thing doing? And then common failure modes. Can't connect to the SFTP server. Sometimes the data is out of date. This is the job actually that failed when I was camping in Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio. They had to walk somebody through rerunning. And then instructions for how to rerun the job. And I give 2 options here. I've got through Management Studio, walking through, finding the job, right click and run it. Or if you want to use PowerShell, here's the PowerShell command to make that job run as well. I've also got the contacts here, the internal technical contacts, the internal business contacts, and sometimes I have permission to go directly to that vendor and say, hey, we had a problem, what's going on? In the case of this job, I had permission from the internal person to say, to go direct to our contact, the vendor. She said, look, I'm I'm just going to be passing messages back and forth. You can talk to this person, just keep me copied on the emails. But I don't want to, she said, I don't want to be the holdup between you two. So just copy me on all those emails. You let them know directly. This is the same instructions, but augmented with screenshots. So question is, when do we write a new document? When do we have to write a new piece of documentation? Anytime you find yourself saying, hey, how do I do this thing? Or when people come to you and say, hey, how do you do this thing? Because I need to know how to do it too. So when those questions come up, write it down. When something breaks, now I don't mean when you have a SEV1 emergency, production's down, everything's on fire, you don't say, wait, guys, I gotta start a new document. No. When it's done, you catch your breath, write down what happened, how you got it fixed, so that if that were to happen again, it can be resolved a little more quickly the next time. When you deploy something new, I really made some frenemies with that one previous job, and I just say, look, you're deploying this new thing. If I'm gonna get the pages when this thing fails, we need documentation so that I know what to do at 3 a.m. when I get the alert. When it's something you do infrequently, copying a database, refreshing dev from production, it's not something you do every day. Write it down, get a document together so that you don't have to rely on your memory every time. When someone new joins the team, that's a great. So I just started this job a little over a year ago. I was involved in DR exercise testing a few months after I started. My role was to sit there reading through the documentation while people were executing the process to make sure that everything lined up. I rewrote 2/3 of that document because reality no longer matched what the document said. Most importantly, write it before you really, really need it. Write it before there's an emergency, before your vacation gets interrupted. You don't have to go all out and write the book of armaments or write a massive tome. Just have things documented. Don't let perfection be the enemy of the good. Get it done and then make it perfect if you can. It's never going to be perfect, but having it is the first step. So just about done. How do we measure success? How do we know that we've succeeded in this endeavor? This carpenter here is not going to be very successful with that tape measure, by the way. 3 examples from my past. Dev team asked for a new copy of the production database, copied down to dev. I followed your guide and it finished in about 90 minutes. What was great here was I didn't know the dev team had asked for it. Usually they came to me, they came to the team, it was done, and everything went fine, and I didn't have to get involved. Great. Group chat for on-call stuff. An alert came out, and the person who was on call said, hey, what do we do for this? Someone else on the team said, hey, we're told to expect that alert. It should clear itself in a few minutes. Here's the link to the document Andy wrote and sent to us last week. This was great for me because A, I get the feedback people are reading my messages and reading my documents that I create. Great. Number 2, I don't have to be the guy who says, yeah, I already wrote this document. I told you about this last week. Somebody else is doing it for me. And that I don't have to find the way to say that without being awkward. It's really hard. The last one, this is an actual verbatim quote from my performance review one year. Andy has written excellent documentation. I should learn from him. That made me feel so good. If I'm setting a good example for other people, that's one of the best things that I can do as a thought leader in my organization. Because ultimately, we want to spend our vacations like this. We want to switch off the phone. We want to go offline. We want to go off grid and just relax. And with good, healthy documentation back at the office, we can do that. If you want to learn more about Markdown, there's a couple of links here. When I post the slides, I'll post it to the meetup group with the link there. There's some documentation a little bit more in depth about how Markdown works and how to write it. It's pretty simple once you see it and see a couple of good examples. You'll get the hang of it real easy, real quick. So thank you all for letting me jump in here and do this presentation for you tonight. My contact info there is on my last slide, flxsequel.com. That's my blog. That's the best place to find me. It's Andy at flxsequel.com. FLX is how we shorten my region of New York. We're in the Finger Lakes, so FLX is Finger Lakes. We're one of the best wine regions in the country if you're into that kind of thing, and it is very, very far removed from New York City, which is absolutely wonderful. So thank you again for your time this evening and let me come out and speak.
Anybody have questions, want to discuss? I can
Yep.
unmute you guys. But so you remember, Andy, your SQL Saturday pre-COVID was the last in-person event we did for a significantly long term, right? So
Yes.
me
Rochester
and
was February
correct,
29th of 2020. And then
yes,
2 weeks later, the world stopped.
yes. And I remember this because Chris Sefferlis he was with Pragmatic Works at the time.
Yep.
So he actually rode with me because I drove with him and his colleague as a car share kind of thing. So it was pretty cool. And then on the way back, let me stop the recording. So